Hello YouTube, what's going on? Today we're doing a recently retired machine. The machine name is Toolbox, and I believe the machine has been retired today. So I did the machine, and here I would like to share the walkthrough. So first, let's take a look at the roadmap to root, and then we will take a deep dive into the practical concepts. So first, as you can see here, we start with the recon. The recon will reveal that you have a Windows machine that is running Linux as a VM. And you will find that there is an Apache server running and FTP server that allows anonymous access. Now, we will first harness the fact that FTP allows anonymous access, and we log into the FTP server. We will find that there is a file in the FTP directory which indicates that there is a Docker Toolbox installation. So Docker Toolbox is a kind of installation that's used to host Docker containers. And that's how we believe that the Linux VM is hosted as a container inside a Docker VM. Okay, so you have the Windows machine running a Docker Toolbox on a VM, and the Docker Toolbox VM running the Linux container, which is running the Apache server. So after having that done, we go to the Apache server. We find that there is a SQL injection in the login form used to log into the admin panel. So the SQL injection is discovered and found. You can do it manually, but I used SQL map. Okay, and after using SQL map, we aim to gain admin access to the dashboard of the website. Now, admin access won't do much, so we switch from SQL map to OS shell. And after gaining the shell, the first shell, we aim to go to root. Going for root, first we have to log into the Docker VM, because up until you gain access to the shell, you are in the Linux container. Now, your goal is to log into the Docker VM, which is the Docker Toolbox. After you log in to the Docker VM using the default credentials, you will find private key for the administrator, and you will use the private key to log in to the root or to have root or administrative access. That's the machine, kind of easy and diverse. So let's get started. All right, so as you can see, we have the nmap scan done. Now from the nmap scan, as I explained back, we have the 21 on FTP, 22 on SSH. We have other ports that are open, indicating that it is a Windows machine. But there is an Apache server, which makes us believe that there is a virtualization technology employed on the machine. Since all of the results indicate that the original or the host OS is a Windows, we believe that the Apache server is running on a container or a virtual machine inside the Windows host. All right, so that is about nmap scan and the recon. Now we will switch to FTP. We log into the FTP server, but before doing that, let's add the IP to the host file. Ten 236 toolbox.htp. Okay, so FTP toolbox.htp. Connection timeout. Exit. FTP 236. So we try anonymous credentials. And we logged in. ls. So issuing ls will reveal judging by the output that we have, as you can see, Docker Toolbox running. And Docker Toolbox, actually, if you read the documentation, let me drag it here. So this is Docker Toolbox documentation. Reading through that, of course, it's saying that it's deprecated and you cannot use that for production purposes. Only you can use this for practice and testing purposes. So you see here, the Docker Toolbox installs everything you need to get started with Docker on Mac OS and Windows, and includes the Docker client, Compose machine. Okay, so it's kind of VMware, right, on Windows. Okay, going down, this is the installation steps, building the Docker Toolbox, make Windows, make OS. So you specify the OS that you want to run. Docker released the Docker Toolbox project to make it easier for developers to work on Mac and Windows to get started using Docker. In 2016, Docker released Docker Desktop, which superseded Toolbox and was significantly easier for the majority of users to get started. This still left some users behind, predominantly users who were on Windows, Home Edition 7, 8, and users of VirtualBox. Since VirtualBox users have been able to run VirtualBox and Hyper-V at the same time on their Windows machines, allowing users to use VirtualBox and Docker Desktop side by side on Hyper-V. So it works, it uses VirtualBox technology to create the machines. Note some Windows and Mac computers may not have VTX enabled by default. It's required for VirtualBox to check if it's VTX enabled. Yeah, use the BIOS. Toolbox is currently unavailable for Linux. To get started with Docker on Linux, please follow the... Now you go to the Docker documentation. Okay, so this is Docker Toolbox used on Windows and Mac just to start Linux containers, and it uses VirtualBox. All right. Anything else we need to know? Okay, we will put this aside. Maybe we will need this later back down the road. Okay, so that's enough for the FTP. That's all what we need. Exit. Now we'll switch to the Apache server. Advanced. Accept the risk. Connection not secure. More info. All right, what's going on now? Proxy. Oh, it's the intruder. Okay. So I put the intercept off to be able to view the sites for now. So this is the main web page, worldwide flight service. And these are some content on the page. You can view it and scroll down. About services, testimonials, contact. Normally, when you pen test a website, you have to look through all the forms. This is, for example, a subscription form. You have to test this for XSS, for other OWASP vulnerabilities. You have to test every form here, but this will take time, and that's why we always jump right to the walkthrough and the way that worked. But you may find some scenarios where you have to test these forms for OWASP. Okay, so that's it for the site. Let's view the page source. Looking through hidden fields, maybe we find something relevant. But of course, this is only a note. You won't find anything on the page source. Okay, let's get back. Now, how do we go from here? You look at the certificate information, right? and site info for more information. So we want to take a look at the certificates. Okay, maybe because we're using the purpose suite now. Let me close purpose suite, or just take out the configuration, because I want the page to load with the original certificates. So I'm going to put no proxy here, reload the page. View cert. Okay, so this is a certificate for the page. As you can see, there is another subdomain, admin.megalogistic.com. So this seems to be like another domain. Now, if you try to access this, of course, this is not real. So maybe you will have to add this to the host file. So that's why it's very useful to check out the certificate information when you do a pen test. You may see or you may find other subdomains that you might find useful later down the road. So I'm going to click on cancel here, sudo and host. So here, just add 10, 10, 10 to 36. Here add, let's go back, admin at, okay, copy that. So now let's try to open this one. Let's accept the risk and continue to the site and open up a new tab, paste in the new subdomain and try to access it. So indeed, there is something else that opened. Admin at Megalogistic. Took me to a completely different page. So again, we have another warning. Let's click on advanced and view the certificate again. So this is the public key certificate, and it points to admin Megalogistic. I'm going to accept the risk and continue in order to open the page. So here, as you can see, we have an administrator login form. Now, the first thing that would jump to the mind is trying to brute force that with Hydra. Again, we always leave the brute force to the last step. So this, the second notion is to try with SQL injection. That's why I will use SQL map. So I'm gonna put the intercept on and revert back to the configuration of the proxy settings. Okay. Now we will be able to intercept the request. So put something like admin. So this is the perp request. What we will do here, we will just take this, okay, and go to Toolbox request, paste in the request as we just copied it, and save. We will feed that to the SQL map later. So here, forward, let's see, can we open the page with admin first? We didn't try this. Didn't work. Okay, as expected. So go back to the command line, and here sudo SQL map -r toolbox.request. dash dash batch dash dash force SSL. Let's see if we detect some kind of SQL injection here. The backend looks like the backend DBMS is PostgreSQL. Do you want to skip the test? Skip testing payload, specific other DBM? No. Yes. Okay. For the remaining tests, do you want to include all the tests? Let's see. So there is a hit I can see here. Parameter username appears to be PostgreSQL and Boolean based blind, where or having close injectable. So we have one field injectable. Probably if we try admin, for example, and something like, let's use it here, password or 1 = 1. Can we do it? Login failed. Let me check back on the console here. So with appears to be PostgreSQL and Boolean based blind. So I guess there are multiple SQL vulnerabilities on this installation. Let me try something else. Maybe we can change to, in order to have the admin access, let's change this to, for example, admin. Oh, it failed. One more time. So the login fails. Okay. Let me check back on this. Okay, so judging by the output here, we can see the database is actually vulnerable to Boolean based blind. So we can, without the need to log in, we can just exit. Guess we have something here. Let's see. Target URL appears to be union injectable with 2 columns. Post parameter username is invulnerable. Do you want to keep testing the others? Username, admin, and that's how you exploit it, I guess. Okay. So it's finished. And these are some details about the backend database and the operating system running on that and the PHP version 7.3. Okay, we can repeat this and say --os shell. Technically, you can step from SQL injection to command shell if there is a confirmed SQL injection vulnerability on the target. Despite the fact that I can't log in for some reason, keeps kicking me out. Okay, if the OS shell worked, we're not going to need to log into the dashboard. wait a second, saying username. I was trying to inject a password field, right? Let's try with this one on the username. I think it will work now. It will work. Yeah, it worked. So it worked as stated by the output here, and I was just confused, trying the password field, and actually the vulnerable field was the username, because we used to manipulate the password field all the time. That's why I confused this. Okay, so let's see here. So indeed we have an OS shell. Right now, what we can do, we can step outside this shell to a regular netcat shell by, let's split the tab, view left, right. Okay. So from here, I can issue, we can first open a listener on our machine. Four, 5, 4, 5. All right, and on here we can try. We need a netcat reverse shell. So let me see if I have it on my notes. Let's look for shell. So this one would work, I guess. Let's take this one. Change the IP address and other parameters and use it. So let's make the changes here. So bash if config 14.5 and the port is 4545. Let's execute this from the already gained shell here, paste, and we should receive the connection on the right side. Nothing. All right, how about we, let's copy this back and we execute something here. We forgot to put the bash -c. Oh, and it worked now. So that's the first shell. And as you can see, it is on the database PostgreSQL. So that's an example of moving from SQL injection to OS shell or shell access. If config, okay, let's first use Python 3 -c import pty spawn what happened? Okay, so ID, you are the database user. Okay, now going back to the board. So right now we are here. Okay, we want to move to root, but first, as I said earlier, we are in the database user. Database is running on the Linux VM. Okay, the Linux VM is running inside a Docker Toolbox. So right now we are in the container. We want to move from the container to the VM that's hosting the containers. The VM happens to be in the Docker Toolbox, right? And from the Docker Toolbox, we will step outside of the host machine. That's how we create the escape. Let's get back. And drive my stupid board here. Okay, again, my stupid board is doing some. Okay. Let's move this to the right, to the left. Okay. So I am now in the PostgreSQL, which happens to be, as I said earlier, in the Linux VM. Now, if I want to step to the original Docker Toolbox virtual machine, we have to define or determine its IP address. If config here, as you can see, I am 172.17.0.2. This is the IP address of the Linux container. Now, most probably, if you want to jump to the Docker Toolbox VM that's running this container, determining its IP address is not so tricky. You just have to know that the Docker container, the Docker Toolbox VM, is the gateway of this container Linux. How you know that? Just let's get back to the documentation. And here, if you go to Windows, search for VM. So from here, you can see that how the things were going, right? So basically, the Docker machine, which is a Docker Toolbox, created the Linux machine using VirtualBox. So supposedly, how virtualization works, you know that by knowing that, you know that the IP address could be 172.17.0.1. Normally, it uses boot to Docker. So boot to Docker is used to boot the containers on the VM. And if you look at the documentation, of course, it's deprecated only for practice purposes or testing purposes. As you can see, boot to Docker is a lightweight Linux distribution made specifically to run Docker containers. It runs completely from RAM, is approximately 45 megabyte download and boots quickly. Okay. Features, recent Linux kernel, VM guest additions, SSH keys persistence via disk mount. So go down. So we have default credentials. As you can see, Docker machine auto logs using the generated SSH key, but if you want to SSH into the machine manually, or you're not using a Docker machine, managed VM, the credentials are. So that's how we step into the original VM, which is running Docker Toolbox. So the credentials are Docker TC user. Let me try them. SSH Docker at 172.17.0.1. Permission denied. Well, Docker at 17.2.17.0.1 permission applicable password. So what to do about this? Let me check the documentation back. Now this is tricky. Let me try one more time. Let's I guess it's from it's because of the current shell. Let me try to issue the import one more time. Oh, so it worked now. The password is tcuser, and now you are inside the Docker Toolbox. This is the main VM. Ifconfig. So let's look through the results. As you can see, Docker 0 is the main VM running the containers, and its IP address is 72.17.0.1. And we have other interfaces as well. Okay, now we are in the Docker VM. The next step is to step outside the Docker VM to the original host to gain the administrative access. Let's see where we are, pwd home docker cd ls docker map. Okay, let's get back to the documentation and see more about this. Docker Toolbox. We need to find out the installation path of this VM, so maybe we can step outside of it. C user docker. This could be one path. So C users your user dot docker get back. Okay. So let's try to cd to users. Okay. So maybe we can just go out of the Docker directory in order to enumerate the original Windows VM. So, okay, cd c users. No such file. Okay, ls. Oh, didn't work. cd /c /users. Okay, cd c users. Let's see here, ls. So, administrator default. I guess this is the users directory on the Windows. Now you can just navigate the file system of the original Windows VM. So here our aim is to get to the administrator, and if you go to, let's see if we have permissions to go to that directory. Okay, we have. So ls. All right, our aim is to find if there is an SSH key here. Okay, ls-la. So I went to the user .dat. Also, you have the shortest path, which is looking at the SSH. ls. So you have the ID RSA, cat ID RSA. Okay, copy the private key. We don't need to use the OS shell anymore, or just leave it. Okay, let's go to another tab, and here sudo give it proper permissions. And now try to log in. Send 236 -i ID. Type yes. Password. It shouldn't ask for the password because I provided the private key, so I guess let's put it before the ID RSA. Permission denied. It shouldn't be on the root user, so let's try now. Just froze. Paste. Okay, and you are logged in. So that marks the end of the machine, but let's grab the user flag. Let's confirm first the privileges. Who am I? Toolbox administrator. So ls dir cd desktop dir type root.txt. Let's try it out. Okay, so that was the machine. Thank you for watching.